Greetings, today on my Focus RS I am installing the rear differential polyurethane bushes from Powerflex. Here we are there, this is what we are installing today. The two sets of rear diff Powerflex polyurethane bushes. There are two sets. There are the ones for the rear side, which is these two, and then we have this one, which is for the front, that has like the longer sort of teeth things. So as you can see, they are made of polyurethane, they are yellow. I got the yellow ones. These are for like fast road applications. You can get the black series version, which are more track orientated, but I drive my car mostly on the road, like B roads and things like that. So therefore, these seemed like a much better option for my application. We should get great performance without too much additional NVH. The way that these work then is really quite simple. So what we will find whenever we remove the bolts from the mountings of the rear diff, what we'll see is the bushings that are there are rubber, and they're the exact opposite of this. So they will have holes where these have teeth, and essentially these slot into the gaps in between the existing rubber bushes. So that means that we don't have to mess around removing the stock bushes, which is great. Installation then should be pretty simple. What we have to do is remove a bolt, then put our bushing insert in. Then we get these big mega washers. So you can see the two that we get for the rear have the cool Powerflex cutouts, and then the other one for the front side isn't quite as big and is just solid. Then we just get our bolt back in and torque it up. I think that these two rear ones will be much easier than this one. The access to this one, the bolt for it, is kind of a bit of an awkward area, but we'll get to that. We'll do these one at a time just to minimize the movement of the diff whilst we're doing the installation. And a couple of other things that we are going to need during installation. So we are going to need some type of a blue thread locker, so a medium strength thread locker such as this one from JB Weld, or you could use the likes of Loctite, and then a bushing lubricant. So these did not come with anything. They feel quite kind of slippery from the factory, so they probably will go on. They probably have enough on there just to work, but I have some of this. This is bushing lubricant specifically. This is actually from my good friends over at Whiteline, so if I need to, then I will use this. So yes, once we get these in, it's going to be pretty sweet. Everything will look, you know, very OEM plus. You won't even really be able to see them at all once we are finished, and it should give us a really nice upgrade. The idea behind this installation is that the stock rubber bushes are very soft, and with those holes that we mentioned that these slot into, the rear diff is liable to sort of jiggle and move, especially under hard acceleration, and these basically are just to dial that out. So let's get started. First thing to do is get the car up in the air. Alright then, up on the ramps and under the car, you can see these sort of reflective things. These are heat shields that are protecting the existing bushes and the bolts. So what we need to do is we basically need to pry this off. Now, as you can see, they're really well stuck on there. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit it with a heat gun to try and loosen the adhesive a bit, and then we'll just pry these up bit by bit until they are out of the way. So we've got two of them around on the rear side, so we'll do the rear side first. There we go, so that is it out of the way, and you can see that that reveals our bolt. This is a T55 Torx, and you can sort of see the squishy rubber bushing and the gaps in between that we were talking about before. So yes, next stage is to get this out. Okay, so I've got my 3/8 ratchet here, and then I've got a bendy extension, just a little short one, just to get it around the anti-roll bar here, because it is kind of in the way. Alternatively, you could use a longer extension if you're going to go to the bother of removing the rear exhaust section, but I'm going to try and do it without having to go to that bother of removing it, so let's give this a go. Yeah, so that was just proving a little bit too difficult, so I'm just going to blast on and remove the rear section of the exhaust just so that we have a bit more room to work with. There we go, with that removed we have all the space that we could really need. There we go. Okay then, so with one of these smaller teethed bushes, I'm going to get a little bit of our lubricant on. I've got my finger in an old glove, so I'm just going to use that. Alright, so now we can get this inserted into the car. So one thing that we need to note is that there are two different tooth profiles. So if you can hopefully see the holes in the existing rubber bushing, so there are ones that are wider and ones that are less wide. These match up with the two wider teeth and the two less wide teeth of our new bushing insert from Powerflex. So we just need to match those up to the holes in the existing bushing and get it in there. Alright, so that was just being like really kind of slippy, probably because of the lube, of course, but then the actual holes up in here are like mega tight. You know, it's like going to be very, very fitted, which is a very good thing. It's exactly what we want, but it was just not wanting to stay in. So what I am going to do as a solution, I'm going to line it up, then I'm going to get the bolt over the washer and start getting that in, and then as we tighten up the bolt slowly, it will eventually pop into place. But before I do that, I'm going to put some thread locker onto the bolt. Alright, excellent. So now we have this tightened up just by hand, and you can see the insert is sitting nicely flush right here with the rear of the subframe. So now we can torque this up to spec. Okay, the torque then for this is 66 foot-pounds, which is the same as 90 Newton meters. So that looks absolutely super sweet. So at this point I will just blast on and repeat the exact same process on this side, and then I'll catch up with you. Okay, there we go. That is the other side in and looking great. So all we got to do now on this rear side is to get our heat shield things like put back down in place. So we just want to like kind of pull them kind of tightly, I guess, and push them down and over. Alright, sweet. So that is the rear's done, and now we can move on to the front side. Alright then, as you will see in a moment once we get up in there, the bolt for the front bushing is quite awkward to get up in at, and it is a bit too tight of a space to get our normal like wrench up in there to loosen and then tighten the bolt again. So what we are doing is we're having to sort of MacGyver it a bit. So what we have here is our T55 Torx 3/8 bit. Then we have a 10mm box wrench, which just so happens to fit perfectly over the end of that, okay? We then use a 13mm box wrench to hook into the bottom of that as a sort of extension, so that we get the right amount of leverage to get the bolt out. So when we're doing that, then another little suggestion, just so that our T55 doesn't strip the head of the bolt, what we're going to do is we're going to try and use some pliers to go into the end of our 3/8 socket hole and apply pressure that way, just in order to like hold the T55 in the head of the bolt. Okay, here we are then, the front side bushing for the rear diff. You can see it's right beside where the prop shaft comes in. I've already been able to remove the little heat shield thing. I didn't even have to use the heat gun. It just came right off just with a minimal amount of force. So yeah, you can see why it's such a, what I meant by such a tight space, because this thing right here kind of just gets right in the way. So yeah, let's get that bolt out. If I slide back out here, you can see I've also taken off my little rear diff cooler plate, just because I've got this pry bar up in here. Now what I'm doing with this pry bar is, if you can see, the head of the pry bar is here, right beside the fins of the rear diff. And if we look up in here, that's just at the bottom of this piece of metal, and this is like the rear of the bushing. So what we're going to basically do, because there's only one on this side, whenever we start taking that bolt out, the diff could dip down a bit at this side, and then the same thing whenever putting the bolt back in. If it's down at an angle, then we could accidentally strip the threads, which obviously we do not want to do. So what we are going to do is basically just going to pull down on this whenever we are taking the bolt out and putting the bolt in, just to raise this little bit of metal up. You can see just the end of the bolt sticking out there, just to raise this up and keep it in alignment whilst we're doing that, so that we don't strip the threads. Right, so I have wedged a wrench like in here to do the pry bar thing for me, and I've got my ratcheting. I've switched over to a ratcheting box wrench now that we're loose, so now we can crack on. Just for this last wee bit, having to switch over to a pair of grips, and then I'm just sort of modulating my pry bar, moving. Don't know if you can see the movement, it does move quite easily, of the RDU. Now I'm having to do this because I can no longer get my T55 Torx on the end of the bolt, but it is loose enough just to be able to, you know, use the grips to twist it. Now it's loose enough just to go in with the hands. There we go. Finally. Alright then, we are ready to move on to our bushing insert. You can see the difference with this one. Obviously the teeth are reasonably longer, but one difference then is that the teeth profiles are all the same, so at least we don't have to worry too much about getting the right orientation on those, so that is pretty sweet. So same kind of thing as before at this stage, going to use more of our bushing lubricant and just get that onto the teeth. Cool. Right, so this one is like mad hard to really show you, but you can kind of see where I'm at. I've got the teeth lined up with the holes in the existing rubber bush. I've got the big washer in there, and I've got the bolt in the hole. I did have to give that a bit of a push to get it to fall in there, but it did fall in, and that is cool. So now I'm just going to start tightening it, and hopefully it will push the insert in exactly the same as we did on the other side. Okay, so that is the front side bushing insert in place. I'm not gonna lie, it was somewhat of a pain. Kind of almost had to have like 3 hands to get the right leverage and everything on that, but eventually got that in there. So now all I really got to do is reach up in here and get that heat shield back down in place, much the same as we did on the rears. There we go, and with that we are installation complete. Well, there we go, that is the installation finished of the Powerflex rear diff bush inserts, and I think they look pretty great, even though you can't really see them now once they're on and the install is finished. But for sure they are going to provide a great performance upgrade, and not being the Black Series, it shouldn't increase the NVH too much on the road. But of course I will have to go out and test that and get back to you and tell you about that in the future. But for now all I gotta do is let the thread locker do its thing, and also get the exhaust back on. The exhaust is still sitting over there, but I won't bore you with that detail. I will let that happen, I will get that done, and I will report back in the future as to how these new bush inserts are doing. So yes, I hope you like that. I hope you like this little video. Thank you so much for watching. Please do like, share and subscribe for more content to come very, very soon. Thank you once again. Goodbye.